Hi, we're going to start this book in a little bit of a non-traditional place as far as legal texts for business studies go. I want to start with legal risk management, and I want to explain why. Often, business law is taught as a sort of mini law school. We take all of law school, condense it down to an undergraduate or a graduate business school level, and we sort of teach it that way. We teach the same kind of cases, we try to use some sort of soft Socratic method, and so on. And this can be a really useful approach. It'll teach you the basics of law in a good, steady way. But the philosophy I've taken with this book is that law for managers is very different than law for attorneys. Legal training for attorneys focuses on teaching them to find the right legal answer to a question, or to argue that something should be the right legal answer. It's to take a point and try to prove it. Now, that's not how managers approach legal decisions. A manager confronting some sort of legal tinged question faces it like any other business decision. The question comes with certain risks and certain advantages, and those have to be weighed and a conclusion brought. For instance, if I'm trying to establish a new trademark for a company, the trademark might be somewhat similar to other trademarks on the market. And so the question is, should we use it? Well, we might get sued. We might not. There's certain risks that come with this. There's no sort of bright line rule that says you're always going to get sued or always not going to get sued in most areas of the law. Now, in some, there's pretty bright lines, and we'll teach you those. But in a lot of others, our approach is going to be one of managing risk and using legal principles sort of like we would any kind of business strategy decision. So that's going to be the approach of this chapter. So to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about evaluating risk. Now, evaluating risk is an entire field of business studies in itself, an entire field of statistical studies, actuarial studies, and so on. We're going to not go deeply down that route. We're going to give you just enough to think about the law in this context, and that's about it. So let's go down this route a little bit. Legal risk is one of many risks businesses face. Businesses face risks that vary in severity and vary in frequency. We risk attacks by terrorists against business headquarters. We risk natural disasters. We risk people attacking our reputation online. We risk running into various kinds of legal trouble, getting sued for torts, having people break contract with us, having government regulators come after us for some kind of violation. So in this sense, legal risk is part of this broad spectrum of risk that companies face. And how they confront that risk is going to be the same as they confront any kind of risk. They'll weigh pros and cons. They'll try to come up with some kind of probabilities, and they'll try to make reasoned decisions. Now, what I'm going to offer you in this class is a simple framework, a non-mathematical framework with which to think through these kind of decisions. Now, this framework is a model. A model is a simplification of reality that we use in order to guide decision making or gain some kind of insight into natural processes. So here our model is going to be pretty simple. We're going to categorize the likelihood of an adverse legal event. That could be getting sued, that could be a government regulator coming after us, and so on. And we're going to also categorize the severity of the outcome. And this is going to position us on a two-way table of likelihood and severity. So the likelihood could be low, medium, or high. Now, obviously, you could fine-grain this to exact probabilities, but we're not going to do that. For our purposes, the risk is going to be low, very unlikely, medium, this could reasonably happen, or high, it's almost certainly going to happen. And then that legal event could be, the outcome could be slight, manageable, or severe. A slight outcome is one that really is not going to generate a lot of discussion at high managerial levels. It's just a blip on the radar. A manageable outcome is one that will generate some discussion. We might have to rethink budgets. We want to take precautions. This is sort of a serious event. And a severe outcome, in our terminology, is one that really risks the business. It risks bankruptcy. It maybe risks criminal charges, and so on. Okay, so we first position the likelihood of this adverse legal event and the severity of the outcome together. Then we need to talk about the level of risk tolerance of the company or the individual, if you're thinking about this in a personal sense. People take very different approaches to evaluating risk in their lives or for their companies. Some people are what we might call risk averse. If there's a risky situation with any even small probability of a negative event, they're going to avoid that. completely. Anything that could affect the company in terms of its existence is to be avoided and taken all precautions against. Other companies might be more risk neutral or even risk seeking in the interest of profits. If you're a brand new startup, bankruptcy is not really a big deal. There's huge profits to be made if you can establish yourself in a certain area. You might be very willing to engage in very quite risky behavior, legally speaking, and have that be perfectly consistent with how your company wants to operate. And so we're going to model this level of risk tolerance by simply drawing a line across our chart. And then that line is going to divide a safety zone where we might feel pretty comfortable proceeding with something with legal implications from a danger zone where we might want to be much more cautious before proceeding when there's legal consequences. So this is a very simplified model. If you've taken a class on risk management and probability theory, you know that we can do expected values, we can use utility theory, we can make this very complicated. It seems a little bit beyond our scope here. Plus that implies a level of precision that honestly doesn't exist as we contemplate legal actions. If you were going to ask me for an exact probability of getting sued based on how similar a trademark is to another trademark, there's no way I can do that. I could probably classify it as low, medium, or high, but there's no way I could say there's a 37.6% chance to get sued in order for you to do your expected value calculations under some kind of utility function. So we're just not going to go there. We're going to use this very simple model to evaluate legal risk. So let's use that simple model and model something with it. Just for example here. Suppose that I'm a startup in a new technology area like self-driving cars. And I'm trying to establish a presence in certain markets. And I know that the first person to get to markets is going to get entrenched there and have a strategic advantage to years to come. So I'm willing to engage in somewhat risky legal behavior to do that. So I might characterize myself as risk-seeking. Now, suppose I want to enter a market that's been pretty aggressive against these kind of entrants. There's certain laws and regulations that protect existing transportation services. So I might characterize the likelihood of getting sued or attacked by a regulator as pretty high in that market. At the same time, I know that I can always just leave the market. Maybe I'll pay a fine, but relative to the amount of venture capital I have, the fine's going to be small. And so the severity of the outcome is going to be slight. Okay, so the likelihood of getting sued is high, but the severity of the outcome is slight. And as a result, if I'm a pretty risk-seeking firm, this is going to be something I'm probably going to do, despite there being some legal risks associated with it. This is probably in my safety zone as a company, despite a pretty high probability of getting sued. Now contrast this with something else, a small mom-and-pop store that doesn't have many assets, that really values employees and longevity and reputation and so on, and they're really abhorrent to litigation. They don't want to get sued. They don't want the reputation of being sued. They certainly don't want to risk bankruptcy. They're going to approach anything with a very different set of legal lenses, so you might say. Okay? They're going to be a very risk-averse company, and so actions that our tech company might take, they would be very averse to taking. So what this text aims to give you is to teach you enough law to recognize when these legal risks come, to be able to evaluate them somewhat, or at least to have the language to talk to attorneys to evaluate them, and then to think of these legal decisions like any other strategic decision a company takes. Because really, law and legal related decisions are no different than anything else you study in business school. It's all the same. It's business strategy, it's risk rewards, and so that's the lens we're going to take throughout this class.